A YouTuber called Zesty Jesus recently did a video on the gas passer and why it's the worst weapon in the game. In it, he presented a metric by which to gauge the objective quality of a weapon, and I thought he did an excellent job defining what really makes a weapon good. So, rather than attempt to create my own system from scratch, I'm going to be implementing his scale to determine how good the Scottish resistance is objectively. He used 4 characteristics of a weapon to measure its objective quality, and I'm going to do the same thing, only I'm specifically going to score each one out of 5 points. The first category is reliability.
Does the weapon do what it says it will, and does it do it consistently, unhindered by RNG or faulty programming? Yes.
Just like the stock sticky bomb launcher, the Scottish resistance is king of consistency. Sticky bombs will always detonate when you want them to, and with the Scottish resistance, you'll be able to control which ones will as well. If you were to perfectly recreate a scenario, the outcome would not be changed by a problem with the game's code or design, so the Scottish resistance gets a 5 out of 5 for consistency. The second category is balance. Are the upsides equal to the downsides? Is this weapon good in some situations and worse in others? The answer for this weapon is definitely yes. No one is likely to call the Scottish resistance overpowered, nor are they likely to call it underpowered. If they do call it that, they're wrong. This weapon is far better at creating and utilizing traps than stock, but far worse for direct combat if you're not prepared for it. It's a simple, logical, and mechanically sound trade-off, and earns this weapon a 5 out of 5 for balance. The third category is skillfulness.
Does it encourage skillful development by the player? Is its effectiveness influenced only by the skill of the player and not external factors beyond their control? Absolutely. It has both the highest skill floor and skill ceiling of any sticky bomb launcher in the game.
What this means is that if you want to get 5 kills with the stock sticky bomb launcher, you can easily just spam out your opponents. However, if you want to get 5 kills with the Scottish resistance, you'll need to be good at setting up traps. This is more difficult, but what you'll find is that the harder you work with the Scottish resistance, the better results you'll be able to get. You can create traps and generally be more effective than you could with stock. Most importantly, you will be able to better help your team complete the objective, which, as you may remember, is the goal of the game. Regardless of how well you're doing, if you're not helping your team capture or defend, your kill streak isn't going to save you from losing. So this is kind of important. This is the biggest sign that a weapon is skillful, that it rewards greater effort with greater results. Most importantly, this weapon's effectiveness is never out of the control of the player. It doesn't require any scenario to be true in order to be effective which the player cannot create on their own. It isn't dependent on the class choice of an enemy or an element of the map you're playing on. It is dependent on where your enemy will go, but that's the skill factor here, being able to predict your opponent's movement. In light of all this weapon deserves a 5 out of 5 for how it promotes skill. Now, the final factor is enjoyability, and while Zesty did a very good job creating this system, he made one mistake, in that enjoyability is not an objective metric. No matter what, people will have different reactions to something. Though it is true that sticky spamming is hated by the majority of people, there's almost certainly some people who really enjoy sticky spamming, and others who really enjoy playing against it. And while the former are almost certainly sadists and the latter masochists, the point still stands. So, I'm going to modify this metric. Instead of considering whether it's enjoyable to use, I will consider whether or not it's designed with fun in mind. By this I mean, I will consider the extent to which the weapon's creators took into account what makes a weapon fun for the majority of people. The sticky bomb launcher is designed to reward a patient and skillful player with consistent kills. Achieving consistent kills through one's own skill is likely to prompt a positive response, both from the player using it and the player they are using it against. Dying because your opponent is good at the game is much better than dying because of factors other than skill. The sticky bomb launcher's design takes this into consideration. The problem is that it also rewards an impatient and unskilled player with these same, though perhaps not as many, kills, and this has a tendency to make people, quite reasonably, angry. When a weapon is incredibly powerful while also being exceptionally easy to use, and when it is used in a manner that takes advantage of how easy it is to use, Rather than in a manner that is effective because of skill, this will generally prompt a negative response from the person it's being used against. While it may prompt a positive one from the player using it, it is ultimately harmful to their development, showing them that no, you don't need to get better at the game. You can get kills by spamming mouse 1 and mouse 2, and thus they have no reason to improve. For many people, improving is fun. It's nice to look back and say, I was worse than I am now. I've gotten better. By not encouraging people to improve, the stock sticky bomb launcher takes away from this. With the Scottish Resistance, these factors were taken into account when designing it. By granting the player a better ability to create and manage traps, this weapon rewards a patient and skillful player with more kills than stock, more consistently. Getting more kills is likely to prompt a stronger positive response than getting fewer kills would. Its increased arm time punishes players who attempt to mindlessly spam, which is likely to prompt a positive response from the players who manage to kill the foolish Demoman employing this strategy. The Demoman who is killed because of this will realize that yes, they do need to improve to be effective, and will go on to be a better player as a result. Besides, when a player is killed by it, because of how skill-based this weapon is, rather than triggering annoyance in response to spam, it is more likely to trigger a respectful acknowledgement that they were bested, and a desire to fairly defeat the Demoman who killed them. Not out of spite, but out of a desire to improve. It's also more enjoyable for most people to get a kill based on their own skill than on something else. Thus, this weapon encourages both the person using it and the person it is used against to get better at the game.
Based on all these factors, I'm giving it a 5 out of 5 for fun-oriented design. The Scottish Resistance gets a perfect 20 out of 20, putting it among the best, most fun-oriented, and most well-balanced weapons in the game. Overall, the Scottish Resistance is a weapon that takes more skill than stock does to use, but has the potential for a bigger payoff. Obviously, it comes down to personal preference, but I recommend you give this weapon a try. Originally, this video was intended to be nothing more than a well-edited frag montage, which, as you can see, was still present at the beginning of this video. My intent was to show that the Scottish Resistance was good by putting how powerful it was on display. And yes, this video was specifically triggered by Lazy Purple's comments about the weapon. Lazy, if you're somehow watching this, which I doubt, but just in case, I think you're great, but it's still possible for me to disagree with some of your takes. This was actually my first time using the Scottish Resistance, and initially I wasn't all that serious about it. Despite thinking that the Scottish Resistance might be stronger than most people had said, I still believe that stock was better, and planned to drop the Scottish Resistance in favor of it as soon as I'd completed the video. However, getting kill-to-death ratios ranging from good to excellent and consistently ranking near the top of the scoreboard were enough to convince me that the Scottish Resistance is at least as good, if not better, than stock in most situations. Not only that, but I came to learn that I really love the Scottish Resistance. Prior to this, I was a heavy main, and loved the rush of mowing down hordes of enemies with ease. However, if I'm being honest, heavy isn't really that effective in most situations. He relies heavily on medics and engineers to keep him alive and at the front lines, and in pubs, medics are rare and engineers are seldom competent. Without a competent healer, your low mobility will cause you to die quickly despite your large health pool, hindering your seemingly excellent ability to complete the objective. Demoman has none of these weaknesses, making him the ideal loner class. He has a decent base movement speed, and his weapons are far more versatile than heavies. They allow him to perform long-distance blast jumps, which further augments his mobility. This means that, despite having less health, Demoman still has greater survivability when alone than Heavy, due to his greater ability to reposition himself, dodge enemy attacks, and retreat if a situation turns ugly. His weapons also grant him powerful multi-target burst damage across a fairly long range, and amazing area denial capabilities in the form of his traps. As a result, Demoman can hold his own against any class in the game, with no hard counters to speak of. In fact, the classes Heavy is weak against are some of the ones Demoman deals with best. While Heavy will almost always need help when dealing with snipers and engineers, Demoman excels at destroying buildings and closing the distance on opponents, making these classes easy to deal with alone. Heavy can also sometimes struggle against classes that deal burst damage due to his lack of ability to deal it himself. However, nothing counters the burst damage class like another burst damage class dealing damage to them before they have the chance to do the same, and Demoman is one of the strongest burst damage classes there is. The only class that can even be called a counter to Demoman is Pyro, as all of Demoman's weaponry can be reflected with Pyro's Air Blast. However, this can be easily overcome by timing your grenades in between air blasts, dodging reflex when they do happen, or simply killing them with your traps instead of shooting at them. Demoman also excels at completing the objective, especially when it comes to defending it. Your respectable mobility means you can reach the objective fairly quickly, and sticky traps allow you to defend the objective without placing yourself in the dangerous position of being right next to it, which is something Heavy can avoid if he wants to defend the objective. Demoman's one weakness is his vulnerability to being ambushed, but using the Scottish resistance will see you having traps up at all times, meaning that your would-be ambushers will have a network of deadly explosives to contend with. Nothing stops a pesky ambush class faster than some sticky bombs in their path. Now, the question a lot of you have probably been asking is the Scottish resistance better than stock?
Good guess, but actually no.
No weapon in TF2 is strictly better than another.
Are you sure about that?
Every weapon has its moments. The sun on a stick is awful in 99% of the situations you'll encounter, but in the other 1% where it isn't, it might be really effective. When choosing what weapon to use, you must consider the pros and cons and decide what is worth it to you. The Scottish resistance is better than stock in many ways, but all of those ways require the player to use their brain, to think ahead, and to get better at the game. If you're not willing to do those things, and if you prefer to mindlessly spam, then this weapon is not for you. On the other hand, if you're willing to put in the effort to achieve better results, if you enjoy the process of getting better, or if you simply care about the other player's experience, then you might end up becoming as passionate about this weapon as I am. This passion is what transformed this video from a simple frag montage into an extensive guide on the Scottish resistance and how to use it. I wanted to share this experience with other people, to give them an opportunity to feel the same passion for this weapon that I do. If at least one person switches to the Scottish resistance because of this video, that'll be enough. I also developed a great dislike for players using the stock sticky bomb launcher, but even more so for the quickie bomb launcher. Why should quickie bomb users be granted the same ability I have to destroy sticky bombs? It's already Gaben's gift to brain-dead sticky spammers, and they don't care about their team anyway, so it really doesn't deserve bonus advantages. Volvo plus nerf. Anyway, if there's one thing you should take away from this video, it's that when using the Scottish resistance, you should always be thinking ahead. There's nothing more important than having a sticky bomb in the right place at the right time, so always be predicting your opponent's movement, and always be putting down sticky bombs where they will try to go. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing to this channel. This is the Cynical Enthusiast, currently feeling very enthusiastic. Until next time, friends. Oh, and before you go, I want to say thanks to these lovely people for helping me gather footage for this video. I'll be linking their Steam profiles down in the description, so be sure to go and comment something nice.